What did I just watch? Are you now consulting for the National Rally Party?
And your point?
That meeting in London was, I think, the second time, at least the second time that they had met with Bannon. It was the first time that I was there and I was able to film it. You know, once they got to the part, you know, where they're going to talk concretely about their financials. And you see, it had to come from them. Even Bannon didn't think of it yet, and they were like, are we going to talk about this while she's right here? And
you want to go through the financials? Do you have those documents?
Yeah, they're all.
Yeah. That 2 million or 2 million euro is what you're paying expenses for the month of July and August.
We can discuss all this.
Anything else you need for this right now, or?
I left that part in the movie because it was one of the examples I did have on film to show the audience that there were limits to my access. But I think that that meeting was really important. There was more to that story than what made it into the film, and that's why I worked with Envoy Special and provided them with more context and more footage from that meeting, and why I'm really, really excited that the movie's coming out in France. I think of all the relationships that Bannon has in Europe, besides Nigel Farage, which is sort of this long-standing relationship, I think that if the French people didn't understand how close the relationship between Bannon and National Rally was, it was a disservice. It was in the public interest for them to know. They weren't sitting there saying, you know, Bannon, tell me about how we can get our messaging better in France. I mean, look, he barely at the time understood, you know, what was going on with, he's not an expert in France, is all there is to say, right? And yes, they sit there and they talk about migrants and, you know, gasoline prices, which was interesting that they brought that up, you know, in July. But the real thing that they brought in their binders, it wasn't copies of their, you know, political speeches or text for their commercials. It was their financials. And at that moment, you know, the EU and France itself had frozen their funds, so they were in a really, tough place, and they turned to Bannon, again, a consummate banker, former Goldman Sachs, and he was consulting with them. I don't know what happened when I was asked to leave the room, but from what was said before I left, and they invited me back in for the end of the meeting as well, you know, he wanted to connect them with his guys in Jackson Hole, whatever that means. Again, that's a place where the super rich in America go and, hedge fund people, his guys, that's a term he uses for anyone he knows, but, you know, that he would get them on the phone in a few days and they could connect, and they brought their financials, and he was sort of doing a full sort of like, you know, let's go over where are your loans, like where's your, you know, expenses, debts, you know, where, and that was the substance of that meeting. To me, that's a very significant kind of consultation. It's more than just, you know, putting out a story that you met once or twice. And I think it's evidenced by the fact that then they show up multiple times throughout the year. They come to different countries, you know, that happened in London, they meet in Italy, and then they came to that really lame midterms, you know, live stream party that Bannon had in DC. I mean, so the relationship is certainly deep. I was excited that I got to see a little bit of it, but really of all the parties in Europe, I thought that was the one that seemed like there was the most significant coordination or consultation happening. And I hope that more journalists look into it.